The Mg42, shortened from German, Maschinengewehr 42, or Machine Gun 42, is a 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser general-purpose machine gun designed in Nazi Germany and used extensively by the Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS during the second half of World War II. It was intended to replace the earlier Mg34, which was more expensive and took much longer to produce, but both weapons were produced until the end of the war. Designed to be low-cost and easy to build, the Mg42 proved to be highly reliable and easy to operate. It is most notable for its very high cyclic rate for a gun using full power service cartridges, averaging about 1,200 rounds per minute compared to around 850 for the Mg34, and perhaps 450 to 600 for other common machine guns like the M1919 Browning or Bren. This rate of fire made it extremely effective in providing suppressive fire, and its unique sound led to it being nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw. The Mg42 was adopted by several armed organizations after the war, and was both copied and built under license. The Mg42's lineage continued past Nazi Germany's defeat, forming the basis for the nearly identical Mg1, Mg42 59ths, chambered in 7.62 x 51 mm NATO, which subsequently evolved into the Mg1A3, and later the Bundeswehr's Mg3. It also spawned the Yugoslav nearly identical Zastava M53, Swiss Mg51 and Sig Mg 710-3, Austrian Mg74, and the Spanish 5.56 x 45 mm NATO Amelie light machine gun, and lent many design elements to the American M60 and Belgian Mag. History. Prior to World War I. Even prior to World War I, the German military was already looking forward to replacing the heavy machine guns which proved to be such a success in that war. The Mg13 was one of the first developments toward a goal of producing a weapon that could perform multiple roles, rather than just one. The Mg13 was the result of re-engineering the Dries water-cooled machine gun to fit the new requirement. The twin-barreled gassed gun was developed with the goal of providing a high rate of fire weapon for anti-aircraft use, which was reported to have reached cyclic rates of fire as high as 1,600 rounds per minute. 1930s. This eventually led to the Einheitsmaschinengewehr, universal machine gun, introducing an entirely new concept in automatic firepower. By changing its mount, sights, and feed mechanism, the operator could radically transform an Einheitsmaschinengewehr for several purposes. The Mg34 is considered to be the first modern general-purpose machine gun or Einheitsmaschinengewehr. It was developed to use the standard German 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser full-power rifle round. It was envisaged and well developed to provide portable light and medium machine gun infantry cover, anti-aircraft coverage, and even sniping ability. Equipped with a quick-change barrel and fed either with non-disintegrating metallic link belts, or from a 50-round Gurtrommel, belt drum, or a 75-round spring-loaded saddle drum Patronentrommel 34 magazines, with a simple change of the feed cover for a trommel halter magazine holder, the Mg34 could sustain fire for much longer periods of time than other portable squad-level weapons such as the American BAR and the British Bren gun, both of which were fed by box magazines, while also being much lighter and more portable than crew-served weapons like the Browning M1919 or Vickers machine guns, which also lacked quick-change barrels. The Mg34 was also quite versatile. Not only was it able to be fed from belted ammunition or a saddle drum magazine, it could also be fired from a bipod, an innovative Lafette 34 tripod or various pintle mounts for armored vehicles. Switching between a bipod and a tripod required no special tools, as the mounting latch was spring-loaded. As the Mg34 Panzerlauf, it was used throughout the war as secondary armament on panzers and other vehicles. One attempt at improvement was the Mg34s, an incremental improvement on the basic 34 design. The Mg34s could cope with a cyclic fire rate of 1,200 rounds per minute. Later in the war, the Mg34 was used as the basis for the Luftwaffe's Mg81 flexible defensive gun. However, the Mg34 did have its drawbacks, such as sensitivity to dirt, mud, and comparatively complex and expensive production. Development of the Mg42. In order to address these issues, a contest was held for a true Mg34 replacement. 3 companies were asked to submit designs: Metal und Lackier Waren Fabrik Johannes Grossfuss AG of Dobeln, Rhein Metallborsig of Sommerda, and Stubgen of Erfurt. Of the number of proposals submitted, Grossfuss AG's proved to be the best design by far, employing a unique recoil-operated roller locking mechanism, whereas the 2 competing designs used a gas-actuated system. Interestingly, the company had no earlier experience in weapons manufacture, specializing in pressed and stamped steel components. The company's staple product was sheet metal lanterns. Driving Werner Gruner, one of the leading design engineers with Grossfuss, knew nothing about machine guns when he was given the task of being involved with the project, although he specialized in the technology of mass production. Gruner would attend an army machine gunner's course to familiarize himself with the utility and characteristics of such a weapon, also seeking input from soldiers. He then recycled an existing Mauser-developed operating system and incorporated features from his experiences with army machine gunners and lessons learned during the early stages of the war. Being made largely out of stamped metal, the new design required considerably less machining, high-grade steel alloys, and was much simpler to build than other machine guns. It took 75 man-hours to complete the new gun as opposed to 150 man-hours for the Mg34, a 50% reduction, and cost 250 Rm as opposed to 327 Rm, a 24% reduction. The resulting Mg39 remained similar to the earlier Mg34 overall, a deliberate decision made to maintain familiarity. The only major changes from the gunner's perspective were dropping of the drum magazine feed option, leaving the weapon to fire belted ammunition, or from a single 50-round drum-shaped Gurtrommel belt container fitted to the gun's receiver, and simplifying the weapon's open sights for aiming purposes. All these changes were intended to increase, maintain, or accommodate the gun's high practical rate of fire. Although made of relatively inexpensive and simple parts, the prototypes also proved to be considerably more rugged and resistant to jamming than the precisely machined and somewhat temperamental Mg34. A limited run of about 1,500 of its immediate predecessor, the Mg39 41st, was completed in 1941 and tested in combat trials. Adoption of the Mg42. The weapon was officially accepted, and the main manufacturing of the production design began in 1942, as the Mg42, contracts going to Grossfuss, Mauserwerke, Gustloffwerke and others. Production during the war amounted to over 400,000 units, 17,915 units in 1942, 116,725 in 1943, 211,806 in 1944, and 61,877 in 1945. Mg42 nicknames. The distinctive sound caused by the high cyclic firing rate gave rise to the nickname Hitler's buzzsaw and the German soldiers Hitlersage, Sing Sage, Nokensage, or elektrisches Mg, Hitler's saw, singing saw, bone saw or electric machine gun. The gun, like the Mg34, was sometimes called Spandau by British troops, a traditional generic term for all German machine guns, left over from the famous Allied nickname for the Mg08 Maxim derivative used by German forces during World War I and derived from its manufacturer's plates noting the city where some were produced. Rate of fire. The maximum cyclic rate of the mechanisms of both the Mg34 and Mg42 are often exaggerated and inaccurate. Both guns were designed for multiple purposes. The high rate of fire was for anti-aircraft use. The normal rate of fire was far lower than is often stated. The effective rate of fire was much higher than that of the guns used by the Allies, but this was due more to the cooling rate of its 6 interchangeable barrels, than to the design otherwise. Confusion over this undoubtedly comes from the gassed gun, 1,600 rpm, and the Mg81 aircraft gun, 1,400-1,600 rpm. The Mg34 and Mg42 both were equipped with bolts of different damping rates to control fire rates. In infantry use the rate of fire was likely to have been lower than 950 rpm. The very light buffer has been reported to have achieved 1,200 rpm in these guns, but may in fact reflect confusion over the Mg81 and gassed gun rates. German small arms doctrine. While the Americans had standardized a semi-automatic rifle in 1936, the M1 Garand, the German military kept issuing Karabiner 98K bolt-action rifles due to their tactical doctrine of basing a squad's firepower on the general-purpose machine gun in the light machine gun role, so that the role of the rifleman was largely to carry ammunition and provide covering fire for the machine gunners. The advantage of the general-purpose machine gun concept was that it added greatly to the overall volume of fire that could be put out by a squad-sized unit. The German military did experiment with semi-automatic rifles throughout World War II and fielded the Gewehr 41 series, of which less than 150,000 were built, the Gewehr 43/Karabiner 43 series, of which 402,713 were built, and introduced the first assault rifle in 1943, the MP43/MP44/STG-44 series, of which 425,977 were built. Due to the relatively limited production of semi-automatic and assault rifles, the Karabiner 98K, of which over 14,600,000 were built, remained the primary service weapon until the last days of World War II, and was manufactured until the surrender in May 1945. Medium machine gun fire support role. In the German heavy machine gun, HMG, platoons, each platoon served 4 Mg34/Mg42 machine guns, used in the sustained fire mode mounted on tripods. In 1944 this was altered to 6 machine guns in 3 sections with 2 7-man heavy machine gun squads per section as follows. Squad leader, NCO, MP40. Machine gunner, private, Mg34/Mg42 and pistol. Assistant gunner, private, pistol. 3 riflemen, privates, rifles. Horse leader for horse, cart and trailer, private, rifle. Allied Army small arms doctrines. The Allied Army doctrines of the era centered on the rifleman, with the machine gun serving a support role, and they utilized weapons with cyclic rates of fire of typically 450-600 rounds per minute. The Allied nations had machine guns with similar rates of fire, but mounted them almost exclusively in aircraft, where the fleeting opportunities for firing made such high rates necessary. The only similar Allied weapon was the Vickers K aircraft gun, and that was used by ground forces only in specialized circumstances. German doctrine was the reverse, with the machine gun placed in a central role and riflemen employed in support. This meant that German forces deployed far more machine guns per equivalent-sized unit than the Allies, and that Allied troops assaulting a German position almost invariably faced the firepower of the Mg42. It was possible for operating crews to lay down a non-stop barrage of fire, ceasing only when the barrel had to be replaced. This allowed the Mg42 to tie up significantly larger numbers of enemy troops. Both the Americans and the British trained their troops to take cover from the fire of an Mg42, and assault the position during the small time window of barrel replacement, which took around 4 to 7 seconds, estimated. Operation. One of the weapon's most notable features was in its exceptionally high cyclic rate of fire of about 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, twice the rate of the Vickers and Browning machine guns, which fired at a rate of about 600 rounds per minute. The ear could not easily discern the sound of individual shots being fired, instead hearing a sound described as like ripping cloth or a buzzsaw. The German military instructed sustained fire must be avoided at all costs. They ruled that the results of sustained fire are disappointing and that the expenditure of ammunition involved is intolerable. In the bipod-mounted light machine gun role, the Mg42 users were trained to fire short bursts of 3 to 7 rounds and strive to optimize their aim between bursts fired in succession. For its medium machine gun role, the Mg42 was matched to the newly developed Lafette 42 tripod. In the tripod-mounted medium machine gun role, Mg42 users were trained to fire short bursts and bursts of 20 to 50 rounds and strive to optimize their aim between bursts fired in succession. The optimum operating crew of an Mg42 in its medium machine gun role was 6 men: the gun commander, the the number 1 who carried and fired the gun, the number 2 who carried the tripod, and NOS 3, 4, and 5 who carried ammunition, spare barrels, entrenching tools, and other items. For additional protection, the commander, number 1 and number 2 were armed with pistols, while the remaining 3 carried rifles. This large team was often reduced to just 3, the gunner, the loader, also barrel carrier, and the spotter. The gunner of the weapon was preferably a junior non-commissioned officer, or Unteroffizier. The high cyclic rate of fire of the Mg42 sometimes proved a liability, mainly in that, while the weapon could be used to devastating effect, it could quickly exhaust its ammunition supply. For this reason, it was not uncommon for all soldiers operating near an Mg42 to carry extra ammunition, thus providing the Mg42 with a backup source when its main supply was exhausted. Another disadvantage of the Mg42 was that the high cyclic rate of fire led to the barrel overheating quickly. After around 150 rounds of continuous fire, the gun operator would open a side hatch, leading to the barrel, and replace the overheated barrel with a new one. The machine gun crew member responsible for a hot barrel change was issued protective asbestos gloves to prevent getting burned. Effective rates of fire. The cyclic rate reflects how fast a self-loading firearm can fire, extract, reload, and recock its mechanism to prepare for follow-up shots. This is not, however, the effective rate of fire. The effective rate of fire is the rate at which shots can be accurately, effectively, fired at a specific point target. Many firearms have been developed with high rates of fire which have proven to have extremely low rates of effective fire. An easy example of this is the Mg10 submachine gun. The Mg10 in 9x19 mm Parabellum originally fired at 1,200 rounds per minute. At this rate, individual shots can no longer be heard, so its fire sounds like a giant zipper being ripped apart. When a Mg10 fires, the probability of hitting a target with more than 1 or 2 rounds is quite low. So it has a very poor effective rate of fire. The effective rate of fire of the Mg34 is listed at 150 rounds per minute, while the Mg42 achieves a slightly higher 154 rounds per minute. No air-cooled machine gun can fire sustained for very long before overheating and malfunctioning. The effective rates of fire of the Mg34 40 seconds were higher than Allied weapons, but the cyclic firing rate is not a huge factor in this, the ability to change barrels is. The cyclic rate of the Mg42 can be altered by installing different bolts and recoil springs. A heavier bolt uses more recoil energy to overcome inertia, thus slowing the action. It must be noted that those heavy bolts also were used along with stiffer return springs. The standard Mg42 bolt weight for a normal rate of fire is 550 grams, 19.40 ounces. One of the roles of the Mg34 and Mg42 was to provide low-level anti-aircraft coverage. A high cyclic firing rate is advantageous for use against targets that are exposed to a general-purpose machine gun for a limited time span, like aircraft. For targets that can be fired on by a general-purpose machine gun for longer periods than just a few seconds, the cyclic firing rate becomes less important. For a relevant current example, the FN Mag/M240 general-purpose machine gun series used by many NATO militaries' cyclic rate is listed as 650 to 1,000 rounds per minute. But its effective rate of fire is approximately 100 rounds per minute. Design details. The Mg42 is a 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser, air-cooled, belt-fed, open-bolt, recoil-operated machine gun with a quick-change barrel. The Mg42 weighed 11.57 kg in the light machine gun roll with the bipod, lighter than the Mg34 and easily portable. The bipod, the same one used on the Mg34, could be mounted to the front or the center of the gun depending on how and where it was being used. The roller-locked bolt assembly consists of a bolt head, 2 rollers, a striker sleeve, bolt body, and a large return spring, which is responsible for pushing the bolt assembly into battery, the locked position, and returning it there when it is unlocked and pushed backwards by the recoil of firing or by the charging handle. As the striker sleeve is movable back and forth within the bolt assembly, The return spring is also responsible for pushing the striker sleeve forward during locking, described below. The bolt assembly locks with the barrel's breech, the end the cartridge is loaded into, via a prong-type barrel extension behind the breech. As it is recoil-operated and fired from an open bolt, the weapon must be manually charged with the side-mounted charging handle. The roller-locked recoil operation functions as follows: two cylindrical rollers, positioned in tracks on the bolt head, are pushed outwards into matching tracks in the barrel extension by the striker sleeve and lock the bolt in place against the breech. Upon firing, rearward force from the recoil of the cartridge ignition pushes the striker assembly back and allows the rollers to move inwards, back to their previous position, unlocking the bolt head and allowing the bolt assembly to recoil, extracting the spent cartridge and ejecting it down. The return spring then pushes the bolt assembly forwards again, pushing a new cartridge out of the belt into the breech, and the sequence repeats as long as the trigger is depressed. The Mg42 is only capable of fully automatic fire. Single shots are difficult, even for experienced operators, due to the weapon's rate of fire. The usual training objective is to be able to fire a burst of no more than 3 rounds. The weapon features a recoil booster at the muzzle to increase rearwards force due to recoil, therefore improving functional reliability and rate of fire. The shoulder stock is designed to permit gripping with the left hand to hold it secure against the shoulder. The open-type iron sighting line consists of a type height adjustable front sight on a folding post and a leaf rear sight with an open V-notch sliding on a ramp, graduated from 200 to 2000 meters, 219 to 2187 yd, in 100 meters, 109 yd, increments. An auxiliary anti-aircraft spider web ring sight is kept in the maintenance kit, that can be fitting on the barrel jacket to be used in conjunction with a folding anti-aircraft rear peep sight that is attached by a hinge to the rear sight element base. The barrel of the Mg42 could be quickly changed by the machine gun crew and weighed 1.8 kilograms, 4.0 pounds. The barrels could have traditional rifling or polygonal rifling. Polygonal rifling was an outgrowth of a cold hammer forging process developed by German engineers prior to World War II. The process addressed the need to produce more durable machine gun barrels in less time than those produced with traditional methods. Later produced barrel bores featured hard chrome plating to make them more durable. The different versions made that the service life of an Mg42 barrel varied between 3,500 and 8,000 rounds. The method of barrel change made the Mg42 unsuitable for secondary or coaxial armament on World War II-era German tanks with the exception of the Jagdpanzer IV. Early versions of the Jagdpanzer IV carried 2 standard, no modification made, Mg42s on both sides of the gun mantelet/glacis, firing through a ball slot which was protected by an armored cover, with the Mg42 retracted, when not in use. Later version Jagdpanzer IVs carried only one Mg42 on the left side. The Mg42 incorporated lessons hard-won on the Eastern Front. Both the cocking handle and the catch for the top cover to the working parts were designed so that the gunner could operate them wearing Arctic mittens or with a stick or rod. This was vital for winter conditions where contact by bare flesh on cold metal could cause severe injury, such as instant frostbite. The Mg42 also functioned well in other climates. Dust and dirt in North Africa and Italy was less likely to jam the Mg42 than the more temperamental Mg34. Lafette 42 Tripod. For the medium machine gun roll, a large tripod, the Lafette 42, was available that included a number of features, such as recoil-absorbing buffer springs, MGZ34 or MGZ40 periscope-type telescopic sight containing special sighting equipment for indirect fire, or the late World War II MGZ44, designed for direct fire only. An accessory to lengthen these sights' periscope was available to use these sights behind cover. It could be set up in a prone, kneeling or high position. The Lafette 42 weighed 20.5 kilograms, 45.2 pounds, on its own and was a simplified version of the Lafette 34 used for the Mg34, as the Mg42 could be operated more easily from a Lafette and featured no semi-automatic firing mode. The legs could be extended with a Lafette Aufsatz stuck to allow it to be used in the anti-aircraft role, and when lowered, it could be placed to allow the gun to be fired remotely while it swept an arc in front of the mounting with fire. Mounted to the lafette and aimed through the telescopic sight, the effective range of the Mg42 could be extended out to 3,500 m, 3,828 yd, when fired indirectly. The Lafette 42 tripod also had a bolt box to store a spare bolt and return spring. Another unique feature of German World War II machine guns was the T24 automat feature on the Lafette 42 tripod. If selected, this feature mechanically controlled the rise and fall of the gun, elevating the gun for 5 rounds and then depressing it for 4 rounds. It lengthened the beaten zone by walking the fire in wave-like motions up and down the range in a predefined area. The length of the beaten zone could be set on the T24 automat. For example, being unsure whether the real distance was 2000 or 2300 m, 2187 or 2515 yd, the gunner could make the mount do an automatic sweep between the elevations for 1900 to 2400 m, 2078 to 2625 yd, and back. This sweeping of a selected beaten zone continued as long as the gun fired. Variants and developments. Mg45. In 1944, the material shortages of the Third Reich led to the development of a newer version, the Mg45, or Mg42V, which had a different operation mechanism that used roller-delayed blowback as opposed to roller locking. For this reason, the Mg45 is considered a different type of firearm, as the mechanisms of these two guns are different. It used steel of lesser quality, which reduced weight to 9 kg, while retaining the horizontal cocking handle. First tests were undertaken in June 1944, but development dragged on and eventually only 10 were built. The tested Mg45/42V fired 120,000 rounds in succession at a rate of fire around 1,350 rounds per minute. The Mg42V had some influence in the post-war development of roller-delayed blowback system, as employed in modern Heckler & Koch small arms. The Sig Mg 710-3 machine gun was based on the design of the Mg45 using a slight modification of the roller-delayed action. Its rate of fire is stated to be 900 rounds per minute, the same as the heavy bolt Mg42, and definitely feasible, unlike the claim above, which is not credible, of a sustained 1,350 rpm. This is a cyclic rate, not an effective rate of fire. The sustained rate of fire is determined by cooling, not action speed. T24 Machine Gun. The American military copied the Mg42 during the war as a possible replacement for the Browning automatic rifle and M1919A4 for infantry squads, the new version being chambered in the .3006 cartridge. Saginaw Steering Gear constructed a working prototype designated as the T24 Machine Gun. It could also be used on an M2 tripod. The gun was made as an exact copy of the Mg42, which was chambered in 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser caliber. The only change was to use a barrel chambered in .3006. The 7.92 x 57 mm was 300 foot-pounds more powerful with a larger bullet, so the suggestion that Saginaw Steering Gear abandoned the project because .3006 is more powerful is untrue. The 7.92 x 57 mm is ballistically superior. When the prototype was fired at Aberdeen Proving Ground, it fired only one shot and failed to eject the cartridge. A second attempt had the same result. The engineers had made no adjustment to the design to accommodate the longer .3006 cartridge. The U.S. Army wanted to be able to manufacture this gun because it was so much cheaper to make than current guns. However, this never took place. German weapons designers adopted a philosophy during World War II of making guns which could be more efficiently manufactured. The Mg42 was a prime example. When U.S. soldiers first saw the gun, it was ridiculed for its use of stamped steel parts, until it was realized how much quicker and more cheaply guns of this type could be manufactured. Mg51. The Swiss Mg51 or 7.5 mm Maschinengewehr 1951 was based on the design of the Mg42 chambered for 7.5 x 55 mm Swiss GP11. The final design, which appeared in 1950, was in most respects still similar to the Mg42, although many components were produced by machining instead of stamping, which increased the weight, the stability, and the production costs of the machine gun. To prevent short shots, Waffenfabrikbern changed the locking system from roller to flapper locking. The resulting weapon had a cyclic rate of fire of 1,000 rounds per minute, was in the light machine gun roll 4.4 kilograms, 9.70 pounds, heavier than the German Mg42, and much more finely made and finished. M53. In Yugoslavia, this Mg42 variant was built at the state-owned Zavodi Kravina Zastava company as the M53 machine gun using original German machinery, retaining the 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser caliber. By doing so, the Yugoslavs retained the original weapon's design features, making the M53 a near-exact copy of the German Mg42. The only major differences are a slower rate of fire and no anti-aircraft sight mount. The aiming range of the M53 is 2000 m, 2187 yd, and the terminal range of the bullet is 5000 m, 5468 yd, the same as the Mg42. Mg42s captured in Yugoslavia at the end of World War II were put into reserve of Yugoslav People's Army as M53/42s. The last military use of M53s in Yugoslavia was in 1999. Some quantities of M53s were exported to Iraq in the 1980s and saw extensive action during both Gulf Wars. There is evidence that some M53s are still being used by Peshmerga forces in northern Iraq in the ongoing war against ISIS. M53 was known under the nickname, Iraq Mg3. The Mg3, originally the Mg1, is the Mg42 design rechambered to 7.62 x 51 mm NATO. It is the primary general-purpose machine gun of the modern German armed forces, Bundeswehr. A number of other, NATO, armies around the world have adopted the Mg3, and it remains in widespread service today. Its belt feed mechanism was copied and used in the design of the M60 machine gun. The trigger mechanism of the FN Mag or Mag58 is a virtual copy of the Mg42's, and the Mag58's belt feed is also very similar. The Mg3 and its preceding variants all share a high level of parts interchangeability with the original Mg42. Like the Mg42, the Mg3 cyclic rates of fire can be altered by exchanging the standard weight, about 650 grams, 22.93 ounces, bolt used for the standard 1100 to 1200 rounds per minute rate of fire for an extra weight, about 900 grams, 31.75 ounces, bolt for a reduced 800 to 950 rounds per minute rate of fire. It must be noted that those bolts also are used along with different recoil springs. Mg74. The final variant to date is the Mg74, developed by Austria, and since 1974 it is the standard machine gun of the Austrian armed forces. After its founding in 1955, the Austrian army was equipped with old guns temporarily out of U.S. stocks. Starting in 1959, these Browning M1919 were largely replaced by the Mg42 with modified barrel and bolt for the new 7.62 x 51 mm NATO. But to introduce a modern weapon of its own production, the Office of Defense Technology, in cooperation with Steyr-Mannlicher and Beretta, developed a gun specifically for the Austrian army. The German Mg42 59th that was introduced in 1959 with the Bundeswehr to replace the US machine guns, served as the basis, which was similar to the Austrian 7.62 mm Mg42. Targets were to reduce, among other things, the cyclic rate of fire and weight, and have more versatile sights and mount. The development of the weapon was completed in 1974. It replaced from this year the Mg42 as the Mg74 of the Austrian Federal Army. The modifications to the basic Mg42 design include an extremely heavy bolt, 950 grams, 33.51 ounces, versus the 675 grams, 23.81 ounces, Mg3 bolt, which reduces the cyclic rate of fire to around 850 rounds per minute. Rate of fire can be varied, if necessary, by changing the bolt and recoil spring. In addition, a select fire trigger group was added to allow semi-automatic fire, single shot, compared to the traditional fully automatic only fire capability of the original Mg42 design. The Mg74 also has a modern polymer stock and hand grips to save weight. Usually colored a dark green, adjustable rear sight, 35 degrees horizontal, vertical 15 degrees, an additional anti-aircraft sight can be mounted optional. Sig Mg 710. The Swiss Sig Mg 710-3 machine gun was based on the design O.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.